Hey everybody, it's Roy from Rarefied. I just wanted to give you guys a little update on some of the new toys at the studio. It's been about 1.5 years since the last studio update tour, and I've gotten a bunch of new cool things, so let's take a look. So this is kind of funny, but you know how cassettes are big again? I decided to get a cassette recorder, and this unit also has a CD player, but mainly I wanted it for the cassette recorder, and it was hard to find something that like actually had professional inputs and outputs, but I located this old Tascam CD A700, and it actually got balanced inputs and outputs, so I can, you know, do a proper tape transfer, or either way I can record from the tape to digital, or if you have something that you want to go onto a tape, I can do that now. So, you know, I can't do a mass production for you, but I can do a few small run of tape, or if you just want to like get like a cassette kind of sound to your mix or something like that, we can do that too. All right, over here we've got a very unassuming looking black box, but it's actually a Burcast M7 Reverb, which has become kind of a new standard of high-end digital reverb in an actual hardware unit that you can get. But what's funny about this one is I bought a version that doesn't have a screen, and it doesn't really have any knobs except for this input gain and the power switch. But that's because Exponential Audio, before they got bought by Isotope, put out a plugin to control the Burcast M7. So that's great because I can just be working in Pro Tools, open up the plugin, you know, choose a preset or start tweaking the virtual knobs, but it all actually changes the real settings in the hardware, and then it's saved with the session, and I'm sitting there in the sweet spot making all the decisions. So it's pretty cool. So over here we've got a Trident A Range EQ. Now I know they sell a version of this in 19-inch rack mount, which has got the preamps and the EQ. This is actually just an EQ in 500 series module. So yeah, the Trident A Range was like Trident Studios building their own console. That was the first version that they did, was the A Range, and they only built about 10 or so, is my understanding. So there's not too many of those consoles floating around, but a company went ahead and created, you know, kind of a recreation of the EQ. And it's interesting, EQ, because the boost and cut are on faders instead of knobs, which is kind of funny, but kind of fun also. So there's also a high pass and low pass section. You can engage different frequencies, and otherwise you've got, you know, several different sections to the EQ, from, you know, low mids, high mids, and highs that you can boost and cut. I guess it's 15 dB. So a pretty cool EQ. I'm liking it a lot on electric guitars. So over here next to the Trident A Range, we've got a Harrison 32 EQ made by Great River, who I used to have one of their preamps. Really great company. This is on loan from Justin Truelove. Thanks, Justin. Another engineer that likes to use the space. So yeah, the Harrison console maker, they still exist. But back in the day, these famously got used by the engineer-producer Bruce Swedien, and he was like worked on Michael Jackson's Thriller, for instance. So great sounding EQ. I haven't had a chance to like really put it through its paces yet, honestly, but I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and he really was digging the way the high pass and low pass worked, and especially for kind of getting rid of things that are too brittle, just rolling back the highs a bit. So yeah, looking forward to getting into it more. All right, another EQ here. This is a Cappy BT50. This is a recreation of the API 550 equalizer, kind of going for the original sound of the 550. It's got the high frequency area, mid frequency, and low frequency, with fixed EQ points that you can boost or cut by 12 dB. as well as a fixed low pass filter and high pass filter. So Cappy is a great company. A lot of the stuff you buy from them, you buy as a kit you can build, or there's people out there kind of putting together the kits, and you can just buy it all together. So that's how I did it. Yeah, and then you can put different op amps in it, and it'll kind of change the sound. So I think this has the louder than Liftoff Rogue Ones in there. So it's a great EQ. I really like it on snare drum specifically. All right, moving on. We got over here an SPL Transient Designer. This is a 4-channel transient designer. It really just gives you the ability to adjust the attack and sustain of an instrument. So it's really great on drums, of course, because you can make something more punchy or less punchy. And what I love about it most is on things that are ringing out too long, like toms, you can cut the sustain on them a lot and really just clean up that whole situation. So there's 4 channels, and you can link channels together if you have stereo pairs. And yeah, I use it all the time when I'm tracking drums. I'm excited about this one. It's the Eventide, or Eventide, depending on how you want to pronounce it, model H3000. This is the DSE version. However, it's been upgraded to be the D35 or the H3500. So it's just been, the firmware has been updated, or the program's been updated. So yeah, this was one of the kind of earlier multi-effect digital units. It can do all these weird pitch shifting programs. It's got reverbs, it's got delays, and Eventide is still out there making around like the H9000 or something like that. They're still making a similar kind of box, and they actually still like always harken back and have programs that were like H3000 type programs. But there's something about the H3000 that people really dig, and it must be some magic in the analog part of it, or maybe something about the converters they use or something. But yeah, this thing has a lot of programs. Let me see if I can just kind of show you, like, this is the hundreds, and it goes up into the 900s of various types of programs, and some of them are really funny, like Scary Movie, and like there's a lot of funny names, and some of them sound insane. I mean, it's just one of those boxes that just will like blow your mind with like crazy sounds that it can make and transform your guitar or your vocal or anything through it. So yeah, it's been really fun having this around. This is just a second distressor that I have now. I used to have just one, and this is a classic studio staple now at this point. And it can do everything, from very subtle to extreme compression. So it was great. I got a second one. Now they can be used in stereo pairs. And I also upgraded the model. I think I just had the EL8 before, and now I went ahead and had it upgraded to the EL8X and bought a second EL8X. So that gives you the British mode option, which is kind of like how on the 1176 it does like the all-in thing. And then it also has this stereo image link thing, which when you're using it as a stereo device, it kind of keeps the stereo image more precise. So yeah, just a small thing there, but yeah, glad to have two. All right, over here we've got a Studio Technologies AN2 stereo simulator. I had never heard of this box before. A friend of mine just hit me up randomly and was like, hey, I'm selling some stuff. And I looked through what he was selling, and he had 2 of these. And I was like, what are those? So it's like an analog box that will take a mono input and make it sound stereo or stereo-esque. So that intrigued me, so I got one, and it's been really cool to have. I really like it. So on the far left, we've got a stereo width control, and then there's a section here that's modulation, so you can actually have it kind of do a chorusy type of thing, There's a depth control for that, that's obviously on off too, as well as a rate. So yeah, if you do the rate really high, it's going to sound kind of warbly. But if you keep it really low and maybe don't go too high in the depth, like you can get like a really cool effect with that, like a chorus, but not too much. And there's what they call stereo depth also, which is a little different between width and depth. Not quite sure how to describe that, but I guess it kind of makes things feel like they're sitting back in the mix more. And then there's just a gain. So yeah, I've really enjoyed using this on, let's say, a background vocal or a mono keyboard that I want to make sound stereo or something like that. All right, so over here we've got another 500 series module. This one's interesting. It's the Clariphonic Parallel Equalizer from UPK Kush Audio. So it's a funny equalizer because there's no frequencies listed here. It's all just names. So you got to use your ears with this one. You've got silk or shimmer on top as an option. Or you can do sheen or presence, and this is the amount of one of those four things that you must choose. And it starts with basically none of those things being added to your signal, and then as you bring this up, it's boosting some particular frequencies, although we don't know which ones exactly. But you also have on the bottom another set of frequencies, which goes between open or lift. And you'll notice they call also this knob the clarity knob and this knob the focus knob. So it's a very esoteric kind of way of thinking about EQ. And it also works differently than most EQs because it is blending in parallel a boosted version of the dry signal. So you still always have the dry signal there, and then you get this additional version of it mixed in, which apparently is really good for keeping the phase from getting messed up. But despite it being a little funny with the names and stuff like that, it's actually a pretty cool equalizer, especially if you want to add like a magical top end to a vocal. And I've actually found it to be quite amazing on snare drums. Just to like really open up a snare drum and add some top also. So I'm digging it. Here we've got another 500 series unit. This is the Standard Audio Stretch. This one is quite interesting. So this is based off of an idea of the way people used to use or maybe abuse Dolby noise reduction units, which would normally be used to keep your tape machines from being too hissy. And basically what those units would do is they would pre-emphasize the signal sent to the tape. So they would, kind of boost the top end of the signal sent to tape and do some kind of compression. And then on what comes off the tape, it would be like the opposite. So it would reduce the top end and kind of do an expansion. And that would allow you to get, more signal onto tape, and your signal would go in kind of with like almost like the treble was all boosted, but then it would undo all that stuff. So that would essentially end up reducing the tape hiss and give you a better signal to noise ratio to a tape machine. But what people started to do is use it just with the processing going in, and to have the processing that you're supposed to have on the way out off. So you would get this like compression and this like this high frequency kind of boosting happening, and people found that it could actually like really enhance a vocal or something like that. So the Stretch does those things and other things too. It has various modes. As you push this filter button, you kind of get different versions of processing, and some are kind of more focused on the low end actually. So this thing can really enhance the subs if you use it in a particular way, and some are geared more towards the high end, and can add that kind of magic shimmer on something. Or it can do both at the same time. And there is a mix knob, so you can just bring it in a little bit because the effect can be quite extreme. So yeah, I'm kind of getting my hands dirty with this a little bit now and finding uses for it, including, yeah, that vocal thing, just adding the kind of a magical air on top of a vocal. And I have used it recently on a kick drum just to like kind of create an extra sub thing going on. So it's pretty cool. Okay, over here I have now a Chandler Limited TG 12345 Mark IV equalizer 500 series. So this is a kind of a complement to my Chandler Limited TG2 mic preamp. So yeah, these things were basically replications of an old console EQ from Abbey Road EMI Studios where the Beatles recorded. And there was a particular variant of the consoles over there, the TG 12345. And I don't know why they call it that. But yeah, this is essentially a replication of the EQ in there. So it's pretty simple. It's got a presence section, which are these two knobs, boost and cut here and frequency selection here, and a bass boost and cut, which just has two different frequencies, and I forget what they are. One of them is 90 hertz, and the other I forget. But so yeah, pretty simple, but definitely can add that kind of magical mid-range on something, although it also goes up to 10K, so you can get some top end. And then of course you can get a little extra bass or less as you needed. But yeah, it's pretty cool to have the combination of the mic pre and the EQ as a little almost mini channel strip, although it could use a compressor too, I suppose. Okay, over here we've got a pair of standard audio Level ORS. These are the Mark II anniversary editions. So before I had the first editions of the Level ORS, which looked gray, and they made this special black version initially for the Mark II. And you know, why did I get the Mark IIs? Well, for one thing, the noise floor was lowered quite a bit with the Mark II, which was nice because you know, they're a bit of a noisy unit. What these do is they're modeled after the Shure Level Lock, which was a crazy compressor that was really meant for like PA announcers or something like that. Like it would try to keep the level like the same no matter what was coming in. But the result of that in other applications is that it creates this crazy pumping compression. And they also threw in this crunch mode, which they had on the first version too. And that's just a distortion. A really good distortion though, which I enjoy a lot. But on the Mark II, they added a bypass. Before it was just, you couldn't bypass it basically. And also when you're in the crunch mode, the distortion mode, before this fast and slow knob only worked on the level mode, which does the level OR thing, or the level lock thing rather. But now in crunch mode, the now they added medium too. Fast, medium, and slow act like a low pass filter, so they get rid of more and more highs, I think, as you go down to slow. And yeah, they did add a medium setting for the level mode, which is nice, gives you a little more option. So yeah, they're pretty crazy compressors, distortion units that are pretty fun on things like drums. All right, I'm really excited about this one. This is a plate reverb. It's not the classic EMT 140, but it's very similar. It's actually called the Pluto plate, and it's the only one I could find on the market that you could kind of buy right now, although maybe there's some more coming up on the market soon. But I just really liked it because it's got this remote dampener. So there's this Ethernet controller right here that you hook up to your computer, and there's a plugin that lets you change the reverb time from the plugin. So you're sitting, you know, in your sweet spot, and you can decide how much reverb you want. You don't have to come out here and crank a wheel or anything like that. You just move this plug-in slider, and then an internal motor actually moves and pushes a dampener more or less against the plate. So if you don't know what a plate is, it's just basically a giant rectangular piece of metal, and it's vibrated by a little transducer by the audio signal, and then the whole plate, you know, kind of shakes with the audio signal, and there's pickups that pick up that decay. So yeah, it's pretty cool. And also, what's interesting about this is it's a passive design. So there's a little amplifier that I have below that drives the plate, and then there is the outputs go through my mic tie lines and show up at the Neve console, and you have to amplify it there. But you could choose different preamps, and you could change the sound a little bit if you went with a different preamp. All right, I'm also really excited about this guy right here. This is the classic Neumann U47 microphone, vintage microphone. It's not a copy. It's not, well, they never made a reissue, but yeah, this is the real deal. If you know anything about microphones, this is one of the classic tube microphones from Neumann. I think it was made in the 50s, and yeah, it's got the original transformer. It's got the M7 capsule reskinned. I think every M7 capsule had to be reskinned. So some of them had the K47 capsule, which was a replacement capsule that sounds a little bit different. But yeah, it was the tube is not the original tube. It had to be modified to use a slightly different tube. But yeah, those original tubes are getting really hard to come by. So I think in the end that's going to be probably to my advantage, as eventually I'll have to replace the tube and stuff. But yeah, it sounds amazing. Been using this mic a lot. It kind of stays up a lot of days. It's got, of course, got the cardioid and the omnidirectional patterns. So yeah, the classic U47 here at Rarefied. Okay, so this is an AEA R88. This is actually a stereo ribbon mic in a Bloomline configuration. Pretty cool mic. So basically you have two long ribbon elements, one stacked on top of each other, and you'll see a number 1 here. That's basically one of the ribbon elements picking up kind of in this direction, and then there's a 2 over here that's picking up like this. So those are the two ribbon mics kind of 90 degrees from each other and doing the Bloomline thing, if you know what that is. It's just a method of stereo recording. And then there's a special cable that comes out onto 2 XLRs that you plug in, number 1 and number 2, and away you go. So I've been having fun with this, trying it out on piano and drum overhead and room mic for drums, or room mic for anything. And it's been sounding really good. All right, here we have a pair of Telefunken 221B tube microphones. So these ones are interesting because they're actually made by that other company called Schoeps, but they're badged Telefunken. So I'm not really sure why that was done back in the day, but I guess Schoeps would do that. They would make certain mics that they'd have other companies put their name on. So these are Schoeps 221Bs or Telefunken 221Bs, I guess basically the same thing. So yeah, it's a small diaphragm tube microphone. If you remember from the last video, I used to have the Telefunken Elam 260s, which were also small diaphragm tube mics. I ended up selling those and buying these instead, just because I liked how they sounded better. These are actually vintage, microphones. And yeah, I've been using them a lot as drum overheads and piano mics. They're well known in the classical world too. So they're great on strings. I've used them on strings before too. The diaphragm on there is the M934C. You can switch between cardioid and omnidirectional by flipping a little switch on it. So yeah, some really amazing small diaphragm tube mics. All right, moving on to some cool little synthesizers. Well, I went ahead and got one of those Behringer Model Ds because why not? It's like a very affordable version of the Moog Model D. So totally analog synthesizer, essentially replicating the classic Moog, and highly affordable. Sounds really good. I mean, I don't have a Moog Model D to compare it to, but this could totally pass muster, I think, for most projects. Okay, I've always joked that the one keyboard I don't have is a Mellotron. Well, I still don't have a Mellotron, but I have this digital Mellotron. So it's just a small little version. They've made several versions of these now. Um, yeah, it's got all the samples from the original Mellotron and the Chamberlain, which is another kind of similar thing with a tape loop based uh, keyboard. So yeah, it's really cool. The sounds sound really good, and I really like that you can blend between two sounds with it. So like you can select, an organ sound and a trombone, and then you can have it, 50% of each, or all the organ, or all the trombone, or some variation between, and you can get these kind of combination sounds. It's also got a pitch shift on it, and a tone knob to just do a treble boost or bass boost kind of thing. So yeah, a really cool little digital Mellotron. Here's a funny one. This is the Stylophone. Just a little toy, really. It's got this stylus that you push against the metal keyboard. And you get funny buzzy sounds that you can change in a few different ways. And vibrato. So just kind of a fun little toy. All right, so I also got a toy piano now. My son had this for a while, and his grandparents decided to buy him the bigger version. So this little one came into the studio. It's the classic Show and Hut, which is like the toy piano company, and if you wanted a toy piano on your record, you could do that. All right, I really am excited about this one too. This is the ARP String Ensemble, aka the Selena. So this is like a 70s string synthesizer. Which doesn't have realistic sounding strings, but it has a very cool sounding strings, viola, violin, as well as some horns, trumpet, and what they just call horn. I had to relabel these because the original labels rubbed off over the years, because yeah, this thing's old and super heavy, which is why I'm standing in the corner telling you about it instead of lifting it out of here. But yeah, it's just got this amazing virtual string sound, but with this obvious 70s sort of vibe to it. I don't know how to describe it, but when you hear it, you know. We've heard it before on many recordings. So this one's been refurbished and everything, and yeah, I really love it. All right, I got a few new pedals too at the studio. So here's one, the Autobit Junior from Maris. I used to have the Autobit 500 series unit. I ended up selling it because I wasn't going to use that much, and I got the pedal version instead, which actually does a lot more. So yeah, this thing makes all kinds of video game kind of sounds. It's a bit crusher, but it has like this sequencer thing in it, and yeah, it sounds nuts. I also have a Mellotron Phaser 2. This is like a classic phaser from Mellotron. It actually has a full like plug you plug in the wall, and yeah, just a really rich, beautiful phaser. There is a Dark World dual channel reverb from Chase Bliss Audio, one of my favorite pedal companies. So this thing has like two different reverbs in it that you can either have one go into the other, either direction, or they can both be going at the same time in parallel. And they sound very different, so you can get like some weird like lo-fi things, and then some like springs and plates and halls and stuff like that. So it's been fun playing with that. And then I've got two of these pedals from Game Changer Audio. I have their Plus pedal. This is a really interesting pedal that lets you like sustain a note on guitar like you would on a piano, basically by using like a kind of a sampling mechanism that kind of quickly samples like the last thing you played, and you can like extend a note like infinitely, or or just for a while. So that's kind of interesting. And then my favorite is this plasma pedal, this distortion pedal from them that uses a xenon tube as actually the way that the distortion is created. And it has this wicked sound, but just check out the way that it looks when you strum the guitar. It's crazy. So that's the actual audio signal going through that tube, and it just has a very, very heavy distortion with like this incredible gating element to it. So like if you're not playing anything, it just really cuts off. So you can get these very like staccato kind of sounds out of it. It's really cool. All right, we got a new amp in the studio too. This is a Sears Silvertone model 1482. So an oldie but a goodie. It's Sears would actually sell these out of their catalog back in the day. It's a tube amp, and just has a tremendous vibe to it. Has a microphone input. I don't know what that's about, but it's also got a regular guitar input and a great tremolo. And I don't think it has a reverb. No, just tremolo, and a tone knob. So it's pretty simple. Really cool diamond kind of cutout here. And yeah, just a really cool sound. Okay, one last really exciting thing I wanted to show you guys was something called the Genesis Control plugin. So as you know, this is the Neve Genesis mixing board. And AMS Neve surprised all of us recently with a plugin that they released, which allows a Genesis owner to control the Genesis from the plugin. It may sound weird, why do you want to do this? But the idea here is it's really more for mixing, and because there's always been automation that you can do with the mixing board through an internal software program that runs on the Genesis computer. But honestly, it was always a little clunky, a little difficult to use. It was the kind of thing where I would be like, I don't know if I want to fire that up and like set it all up. It was always like a pain. But now with this Genesis Control plugin, it makes it really easy to just open that plugin and automate some things. You can automate the fader, you can automate EQ on and off, and you can actually automate the EQ being changed, which you couldn't do before. You can automate auxes on and off and inserts on and off and stuff like that. So this is the plugin here, and as you can see on the top, you've got EQ. This section here would be for the dynamics package of the compressor if I had that in the console, but I don't. And then down here you've got control for the inserts and the EQ on and off, and the aux sends on and off, and some other things here, as well as, of course, we have the fader. When I move this, the fader on the board actually moves, and I can cut the channel, mute the channel, and I can rename the channel to something different, and then it actually updates on the board too. But yeah, and then the EQ, like if I change this, the EQ on the screen, the Genesis screen is changing too. So these are all in sync. So if I move the fader on the board, the fader on the plugin moves. If I hit cut, the cut goes, etc., etc. So it's completely in sync with the hardware. So yeah, you can automate every single parameter, including the EQ, frequency, and boost and cut and stuff like that, which before you couldn't even do with the Encore automation software that came with the Genesis initially. So this is super powerful, and I'm excited to put it to use. Alright guys, that's about it. That was a bunch of new toys got here at the studio. Thanks for watching again. I really appreciate all the views and the likes and the comments. So stay tuned. There'll be some more videos coming up in the near future, hopefully. I know I want to do something detailed about the Neve itself, and I'm sure there'll be more toys coming in next year. Alright, thanks guys.